Everyone dreams about living an uncommon life, but how we define that dream is very different for each of us. And for most, it's a lifelong pursuit. Welcome to the Uncommon Life Project podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living that life or enjoying the journey to get there. We're going to also give you some tools, tricks, and tips for starting or accelerating your own efforts to live an uncommon life, a life worth celebrating and savoring. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Dewhurst and Philip Ramsey.
All right, well, let's just jump right into it. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today on the Uncommon Life Project. Really appreciate your time. This is actually a really fun one for Brian because it was his due diligence that found your website, airdna.co. So just want to give some kudos to Brian. He likes that. So welcome to the show. Let's jump right into it. Brian, go ahead. You can go with the first question since it is your due diligence that got him here.
Yeah. Thanks again, Scott.
Yeah. Pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys.
I probably have 100 questions, so we want to be mindful of your time today. But I think you have there's two stories we want to architect into this. Is kind of your background story of how you got, from 0 to 60 with Airbnb and your background there, and then actual AirDNA and how you're helping people go deeper and seize the opportunity in front of us. So if you could just kick us off, high school, maybe your upbringing and where you got started, very high level, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Oh, back to high school. All right.
Wow. I was kind of shocked that he went there too.
Well, there's some interesting stuff. I was fortunate enough to have some entrepreneurs in my family. My father started a web company, really sort of an aggregator of businesses, kind of an original search engine back in 1994. So I was lucky enough to be surrounded at the dinner table by, big ideas and technology and the internet from its infancy. So I probably have a little bit of a leg up from others that, I had that sort of background. Sure. And that I was able to convince my father to build my first web scrapers to get this thing off the ground. So, going way back, I've always been interested in kind of, just how the internet was disrupting anything. And when I kind of fell into Airbnb, and thought about kind of how many entrepreneurs out there were starting to think about Airbnb as an income source and how I can kind of help propel them forward and give them information, it seemed like a no-brainer to me at the time.
Yeah.
Was it always Airbnb like that? Is that the thing that took off, or was it another idea that then just Airbnb fell into it? Or was it Airbnb that gave this idea wings, I guess?
Airbnb changed all of the dynamics of vacation rental properties. Vacation rentals used to be very hard to manage because you were having to take individual payments from people. You were having to manage a calendar. Your check-in and check-out processes were really bad. There was lots of things that they kind of solved for people to make this a very automated and very unlabor intensive sort of process. Mm-hmm. And so it is what gave this entire industry wings, was saying we're going to give you all of the demand you need for people. We're going to make this instant bookable. We're going to take care of all of your payments. We're going to take care of all resolution issues with problems with check-ins and how we're going to resolve all those issues. So it made it so easy that, I had 7 properties at one point in time, and I was spending maybe 10 hours a week max managing the whole thing, cleaning, check-ins, check-out, payments, everything. And so that's kind of what they unlocked for people, was just the time savings to manage properties.
The scalability.
Sure.
So you weren't always in Airbnb. So can you kind of walk our listeners through your path through college and then how you kind of got into this? Because I think it's a really powerful story.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. So after I graduated from the University of Arizona, I dabbled in some industries like hedge funds and other things like that. I ended up getting into a much data heavier role, really being a data analyst to start off with, and evolving over 9 years at a company called Korn Ferry International into really understanding data at its very fundamental core. That's the database architecture. That's how to create good visuals for executives that kind of synthesize and summarize information into really nice, comprehensible sort of dashboards. So I was in the nitty-gritty of data and business intelligence for about nine years before they let me go. In a restructuring, they offered me a new gig, which seemed really boring, and I said no thanks. And they said, all right, well, see ya. But it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, right? Because getting that comfort of climbing that corporate ladder, and looking for that next 5% pay raise, and it's comfy and it's easy. And
we call it the golden handcuffs. Man, we are on board with that. You're right. Probably the best thing that happened to you.
And so yeah, I took off from that gig, and it was kind of this eye-opening moment, right? Like, I got a nice severance package of 9 months. And so that was like, all right, well, let me go travel the world and do things I was never really able to do previously. And so when I went to go travel, my neighbor told me about Airbnb. As I was looking at storage units and where to put all my stuff, my neighbor was like, oh, have you heard about this thing, Airbnb? You can just like have people stay there and pay for your rent while you're gone. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I definitely will give that a go. And sort of the rest is history. You know, I had my first booking. I took pictures with my iPhone and spent 20 minutes maybe writing up some marketing text. And within 24 hours, I had a couple bookings. And a couple bookings from like some grandparents in Wisconsin and some other folks in Florida. And I was like, wow, this is really, really easy. And so while traveling, I just kept getting bookings. I was managing it from the middle of Cambodia, and just like. Wow. We just saw how kind of easy it was to get people in, get them in and out of the place and get it cleaned. And it was just really simple. And, I think in my second month, I did about $6,000 on an apartment that was costing me $3,000 all in with utilities. And, the light bulb started to go off. It was like, man, this is really easy money. And so maybe I won't ever go get a real job.
And we're in Ankeny, Iowa, and it's dreary out. Where was your first Airbnb, just so our listeners can visualize?
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate in that regard too. I had a really nice 1-bedroom right in the downtown of Santa Monica, California, right next to all the tourist beach and 3rd Street Promenade. And so I was kind of in this really nice epicenter for travel and surrounded by hotels that were going for $400+ a night.
Sure.
And so there was a lack of hotel supply. All the hotels were 4-star plus properties. And so that was sort of the initial thesis of where I wanted to invest later on was like, look at hotel prices, where can you get a nice condo for a few $1,000 a month, charge $300 a night, but that's still 20 to 30% cheaper than the hotels close by. And you're offering a balcony, you're offering a kitchen, a washer, a dryer, all these things that the hotel can't offer. So it was, a great deal and a great value for people coming to the city.
When you started realizing like, holy cow, I might never have to go get another job again. Like how long was that after you quit or laid off or whatever you want to say, decided not to go back to work? How far was that in the 9 months of severance?
If I took it longer than that, to be honest, I mean, it's probably right around that 9 month, around 9 months.
Interesting.
I think the biggest decision was, that first investment in a property, right? You already have your property. It's already furnished. It's making money. It's printing cash. I moved in with my girlfriend and said, hey, let's travel some more. And so that was the easy part. The hard part was saying, okay, here's the first investment property. I'm going to furnish it from scratch. I'm going to put $10,000 on my credit card and I'm going to really hope for the best here. Like I've done my due diligence. I know it works. I know what the model looks like. But taking that first step is always the hardest.
Yeah. And I think we see that a lot too. I was going to echo that in your previous comment of like, I'll just give that a go. I think that's the beauty of Airbnb in getting into real estate is like, you already had a property. Yeah, I'm going to be going anyway. I'm locked into this lease. I might as well try to rent my place out while I'm gone and pay for my trip. It's a pretty easy toe in the water. Mm-hmm. And I think what's so powerful about what you've created, and I want to get to that, is that you help people make that investment decision of like, I want to do a second one. I'm going to do a third one. And it's calculated. There's data behind it. There's metrics. There's a plan. It's not just like, oh man, I hope this works. You're giving people clarity into that decision. And so then walk us through, because I know and again, I'm going to give you a shameless plug now, and you can, plug whatever you want at the end, but you have an amazing ebook on your website that kind of walks through your story and how you've built your Airbnb business and then how you transitioned it into AirDNA. And so walk our listeners through that, if you would, really quickly, of how this shifted from like just renting a couple properties to like, there's an opportunity here and I'm going to press in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I got to, I think, the 7 property mark, and there were some rumblings about regulation in Santa Monica, and it didn't look like it was going to be going my way. And so first thought was I need to diversify where my properties are. So I'm limiting my exposure to one city and where I'm exposed. And so that led me down this scraper path, right? So scraping the Airbnb website, convincing my father to go do it for me. And then, looking kind of where were other opportunities, where were the other markets that were successful in Santa Monica so I could start to acquire new properties there. As I was doing that, I was also, writing that ebook, to try to kind of get a name out there for myself as, as an expert in the space. And I was talking to lots of guys. And I just heard that was a huge need for them, right? There was no competitive intelligence. There was no market insights. They weren't comfortable about their pricing strategy or their expansion strategies or anything. And so there was just a huge void in the marketplace for vacation rentals on anything that was data driven.
Yeah.
And the platforms themselves, Airbnb, HomeAway, anybody else, wasn't really providing any insights to their host. So the light bulb went off, obviously having that 10 years in data, my mind was spinning about all the different ways to analyze and create the charts and the metrics and help the decision processes along the way. I guess it was probably late 2014, we decided to sort of really turn this into a business. It was about 2 years after I started the Airbnb stuff. And it was really kind of this thesis, which, we know there's a gold rush, and either you're going to go out there and start mining for the gold, or you're going to start selling the shovels to everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes that shovel salesman does way better than all.
Yeah, they sure do.
Yeah, that's so true. We use that analogy a lot, actually, in the Levi Strauss analogy, and I totally get it. I actually spent quite a bit in data analytics too with Deloitte and Touche, more on the audit side, and so I had a kind of a background in data. And, looking at company stuff and trying to detect fraud and that type of thing. And so a little bit different angle, definitely not on the programming side or anything like that. But it was interesting. I started looking at Airbnb. And I think even when you look at the progression of like what Zillow has done for the real estate market, there's so much upside. And I don't want to over promote this because obviously real estate ebbs and flows in different markets and that types of thing. But with the data that you've been able to collect and the data out there with Zillow and some of these other sites, it's really reshifting the real estate landscape, in my opinion, in this country, of how you can actually monetize, a single family home or a vacation home. And so where do you see, what are you excited about now? You're 3 to 4 years in with AirDNA.
Mm-hmm.
You've done the Airbnb side. What are you excited about when it looks like in real estate and where this is headed?
Yeah, it's really exciting to me. And I'm actually talking to, head of corporate development at Zillow here in about 2 hours. So, I think we're also trying to sort out kind of really what this all means to real estate, as now there is this new option, which is often much more lucrative for how to monetize real estate and all types of real estate, whether that's multifamily or single family or things that were previously commercially zoned, and how you can kind of flip those into Airbnb properties. But really fundamentally, there's a new sort of way to monetize property. It's not just like a fix and flip or like a long-term rental. Now there's this whole new category, really backed by 1 million vacation rentals in the US alone, that is this new way to think about investing and monetizing space, and what is really the best use case for space. I think is changing. And the gray area between a commercial property and residential property is becoming a little bit more nebulous, right? And so all of these things are creating, disruption, which disruption creates a lot of opportunities for some, and a lot of risk and headaches for others. So,
sure.
So in general, I think what we're trying to create is really valuation models for short-term rentals. I could get pretty nerdy on that, but what we're seeing, we at the core, what we're trying to figure out, what's the revenue generated by every short-term rental in the world, right? So that's kind of the core problem that we were solving pretty early on. And now it is, how do you then take that information and then figure out what every property in the world is worth as a short-term rental, right? So using a bunch of data sources and similar amenities, similar size, similar location, what is the property anywhere in the world worth as a short-term rental that's fairly decently managed? And so that's kind of the big, 3 to 5 year sort of problem that we're trying to solve.
What would you give like a elevator speech? Because some of our listeners probably don't know what AirDNA is at all. So could you give us just a quick synopsis of what you would say AirDNA is and what you were trying to achieve and what it is now?
Yeah, sure. I think, AirDNA is the largest aggregator of short-term rental data. What we're trying to achieve is really trying to empower entrepreneurship in the short-term rental lodging space around the world. What we're actually trying to do is do what I did, is be a guy with 5-10 properties that's competing with the Hilton, Starwood, Marriott's of the world. And we do feel like there's going to be a democratization of lodging as people want more unique, personalized experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Consumers have already spoken. They want really a unique experience that the
Mm-hmm.
hotels can't offer. And so we're trying to kind of empower that shift of lodging to the small guy.
So what's that look like is you go on his website, airdna.co, type in an address, and you can see how many, in a location-wise, how many Airbnbs are in that location and what average price they're getting per night and how many nights per year they're being rented. So you can get a pretty quick, I'd say, a snapshot of, well, is this, because a lot of, I would say, arguments that we would get or debates are like, well, my location isn't very good. Well, this AirDNA can blow that out of the water. Well, yes, it is, because there's 3 of them right around that same area. And this is kind of the analytics for it. So you've done a great job.
Cool.
Now, this is what I think is, totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an eye opener to most people because people think like, oh, I don't have like a Courtyard Inn like anywhere within 5 miles of me. Like nobody's coming to stay in my area.
Yes.
And like, we've definitely tried to debunk that sort of that thought process. You know, Airbnb is really spread lodging every single tiny little town. Everybody's got a mom they got to visit, and everybody.
Oh yeah.
Most people don't want to stay with their in-laws. And so,
Totally.
So there's just like a lot of these little things, like where hospitals are, where colleges are, where your family lives. Like there's just people staying in every single nook and cranny across.
Yeah, and it's funny because back to that story that Brian said at the beginning of this podcast is that his mom was even looking at Airbnbs for his family. Like, it's not just a younger generational thing. It's like, no, like our parents are looking at this, and almost every demographic that you can think of they would rather stay in a house than a hotel. So there's a lot of legs to this. Yeah,
no, I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, the growth is, it's fueled by the consumer, which is the cool part, right? It's, if the consumers didn't want this thing wouldn't be growing so quickly. I mean, people are looking for a great value. They're looking for something unique. They're looking for a bigger place. They're looking to travel with their family and with groups. And, like these are things that hotels, historically have done a really miserable job of is catering to like, longer trips or family trips, and something that Airbnb has been able to fill the gap on really, really well.
Yeah. Can you give our listeners, I mean, you just have so much experience, Scott, give our listeners, like we meet a lot of people, you meet a lot of people, and they're like, man, I kind of want to do this, but they don't maybe have the history or the risk profile to like take that first leap. Can you walk our listeners through like the first 3 steps you would recommend of like getting started in Airbnb, and then maybe how your site can help demystify some of this or take some of the, weight of it out?
Sure. I mean, I think the first like easiest step to take is, throw up a room in the house, or rent it when you're on vacation, or rent out that like in-law suite or whatever it looks like. Right. So you can just kind of get your head around like, how hard is it to market? What do these people look like when they're at my door? How am I going to like get my money? Like all these kind of like basic, really, I think just simple things that people just like always get a bit of heartburn about. And so that kind of just like shows you like, oh, these guys are cool people. This is easy. And like, it's not that hard. And so once people sort of get that initial taste, then they start thinking about, all right, investment properties, and, maybe I'll move in with my fiance now and start this as a full-time rental. We see a lot of people sort of in life transitions where they're like going to upgrade homes or move in with a loved one or whatever. It's a great time to sort of dip your toe in the water and give it a go before you throw the place on the market or what it may be. So that's definitely one. I think, I don't think it's really, there's not that much to it, right? It's one of the things that takes very little investment, especially if it's a current property. I would definitely suggest people do that. You're not going to make much money, if really much money at all, with a private room in your home, but at least get you through the process and make sure you understand kind of how it all goes, and that there is demand before you plunk down some money and make an investment property. I don't even think there's 3 steps to it. I wish I could come up with 2 and 3, but I don't think there is.
Well, I'd say this for my personal experience, and just that we have a house that we just moved into probably 3 or 4 months ago. It's pretty big, 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. And my wife and I are like fixing this up and renovating it. And at the end of it, she was like, hey, we're going to be gone for Thanksgiving. What if we Airbnb our house just to see if it's sold? Like, what do we have to lose? Like, we're going to be gone anyway. Like, And I was like, oh, I love you so much. Like this is so amazing because now we can dip our toe into, and if it rents, it rents. If it doesn't, like I'm not out anything. So
Yeah,
it's a
that's usually the
great thing.
biggest fear is like really just like this stranger danger and like, what am I going to do with all my expensive belongings? And, it's hard to get people across that. It's just, it's in their nature that like anybody walking my door, I don't know. And that is scary to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had 2,000 people come to my place in Santa Monica. I met hundreds of them. And these guys they're all interesting people, right? Like these aren't like, the weird crackhead down the street. These are like really interesting people. And I never really had a serious issue, in 2000 stay. So that's usually one of the hurdles you got to get people across is that people are good. Strangers are not danger. These are just fellow world travelers or people that are coming back to their hometowns that are people you're going to want to meet. And sometimes you're going to be friends for years to come. I had like the quarterback of the Broncos stay with me. I had a president of Starbucks stay with me. I had some like really cool, influential people that, I still keep in touch with today.
Yeah.
That's so cool. We just had a guy on the podcast. He just was Airbnb in half of a duplex, and then he and his wife were living in the other half. And then they would go stay in a hotel if somebody wanted the whole thing. They were kind of putting both on, they don't have kids, and they're like, this is the time to try to make it work. And they actually had a couple get married in half their duplex and then ended up renting out the whole thing so their family and them could stay. And so he's just like, people just don't appreciate. People want unique experience, like you said, and it's just like, it's right in your backyard. It's not, they don't need a Hilton or a Marriott. Like they're looking for, real houses, real people, and real experiences. And so now he's like, they just got their second property, and he's going to gross like 100,000 on 2 properties in Des Moines, Iowa. And people are just blown away by that. And these aren't tricked out, mansions or anything. These are average, I would say, properties. And so what advice do you give, or what is there in terms of like automation or scalability, maybe even outside of Airbnb and AirDNA? Because I know there's just going to be a lot of businesses starting up to help cleaning, booking. Can you kind of talk about that of managing 5 to 10 properties?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's right around 10 properties where you got to figure out some automations and ways to sort of scale things, like just like guest communications and how to automate responses to the question you've heard 100,000 times. And the cleanings, and make sure all the maintenance stuff is being managed, and make sure like late checkout requests, or, there's some things when you get to scale and it drives you crazy every time somebody asks you a question. And so you're like, I got to automate this. And that's kind of what happened to me. So there's a couple tools out there. I think, like I said, around 5, you're going to think about new marketing channels is definitely the one thing you start off with, right? Like, yeah, Airbnb may do really well and it might generate 80% of the demand for your property, but, there is HomeAway and VRBO and Booking.com. And so, one, how do you take that property and push it across all 40 platforms that have any sort of people looking to book those properties? So those are called like, you get channel managers like a Rentals United with Booking Pal. There's a good handful of those guys. Or there's property management systems. There's a lot of those as well. Guesty is one of the more well-known one. And so this just helps you sort of automate all your processes, see everything in one place, have a calendar where you see where everybody's coming and going, and be able to manage everything in one place. I would say, around 10 properties, that starts to make sense to invest in. I think the one thing that most people just don't get right is just the turnover. Like this is the cleaning in between guests, making sure everything's there, all your toiletries been purchased, and like just that basic piece. If you really master that and automate your check-in and check-out processes, your life is going to be very much easier, right? So this is lockboxes, digital keys, paying your cleaner a lot of money. Like I would pay that person, like market rate was $50. I'd pay him $100. And I'd say, I'll go also and buy my toilet paper and paper towels. And I'd give her a tip on all that stuff. And so, just finding that right support to kind of help you with the turnovers is really key to get to that sort of 5 to 10 stage. And then at that point, you're talking about revenue management strategies, you're talking about channel management strategies, and then just, more sophistication in your operations. But again, it's not brain surgery here. There's lots of different tools out there to help you out, ours included.
Let's talk about some of the obstacles that you ran into at Santa Monica. And like some of these counties are starting to put some restrictions on or trying to limit the Airbnbs in the county or city. What have you heard of that? I'm sure you have. And 2, can you speak into that a little bit?
Sure. It's a hot topic right now. I was in Chicago last week with the head of public policy on Airbnb and the head of public policy from Home Away. The hotels have a very concerted effort against short-term rentals. It is, where they're investing all their money is how do they squash short-term rentals because it's impacting their business, it's impacting their profitability. And if, left unchecked 5-10 years from now, like it's a pretty doomsday story for the hotels. So that being said, we know why people are regulating it, right? Hotels don't like it. They're a very protective business. And so one of the things I work with on a daily basis is to help deconstruct their arguments about like affordable housing or fears of this and that, and really empower the vacation rental managers, hosts, and all these OTA platforms really kind of articulate a good story about why this is good for residents, why it's good for property owners and property rights, why it's good for local economies, especially in secondary and tertiary cities that are looking for more visitors, more spend in like local coffee shops and local restaurants. And so, I think when you do lay out the pros and cons of short-term rentals, there's a very clear winner in terms of overall benefit to residents, tourists, travelers, property owners. And so, the hotel lobby's been around for 25 years and very well funded. So they got out the gate pretty strong. But I think what we see is the pendulum starting to swing the opposite direction where, property owners, small businesses are starting to speak up and like the politicians are saying like, yeah, that was pretty short-sighted and pretty stupid. And then like, let's pull back some of these restrictions. So it's going to be a long battle, no doubt about it. 10 years from now, we'll still be talking about the same thing, I think. But I don't think it's going to go overly to like banning short-term rentals in cities. There's always going to be sort of a caveat or a cap on days or whatever it's going to look like. It's going to take a while to shuffle.
Good.
Cool.
Anyway, there's a lot you can talk about regulation. It could be an hour by itself. So I think, there's some good sources for it. I think there's something called strpolicy.org. Airbnb themselves has a lot of documentation on local policy. So definitely before making investments, definitely look at that, see what's on the agenda for your city council. If you've heard any wind of it, the best and brightest investors in this space are really thinking about it almost as a policy first strategy. Like, where do I think policy is going to open up, or what do I think a state's passing that doesn't allow a ban on short-term rentals, and really thinking about where they're confident about the regulation landscape moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So you travel a lot, you've lived in different places, you're looking at all this data. What's, if you're the home guy, who's got one or two properties, or you're in your 50s and 60s and you're like, man, I kind of want to do this. Like, are there any areas in the country that you think are like, wow, this looks really undervalued here? And your site does an amazing job of showing, kind of the hot spots, Memphis, Tennessee, Florida. And so, I'm just curious, kind of from an entrepreneurial sense, if there's a few zones in the United States that you look attractive to you.
Yeah, sure. The way I think about it is a little bit more generally is, I think the urban markets are a bit sort of oversaturated at this point in time. So you can't just get into like a DC or LA or New York or Chicago regulation, and just because it's been a known thing for 3, 4, 10 years. Yeah. So really what I like is like sort of these where people drive to for a long weekend are typically like a really great opportunity. So like maybe in San Francisco, like a Monterey, a Sonoma, and Napa. Those are all markets that crush it. Or in Los Angeles, a Palm Springs, like an Arrowhead Lake, like places where, or like even like in Paso Robles, like a little wine country close by. Properties very undervalued because there's never been investment properties. There's not really a huge secondary market there. And so those sorts of markets is definitely one way to think about good markets. There's a lot of stuff though in the Midwest that just has kind of not been tapped into, like the Clevelands and Cincinnatis and Pittsburgh. None of the major like investors have moved into these spaces because they're not like on paper they're not the most sexy, right? Yeah. Something in Times Square is going to do $22,000 a month, and something in Pittsburgh is going to do $4,000. So it's a bit more like legwork, and it's a little bit more. You got to have 20 properties to make a nice earning, but it is a bit untapped at this point. So there's a great blog post. It's called "Best Places to Invest in Vacation Rentals." I think it's just recently posted. So it goes through hundreds of markets, kind of shows where we think are the best places to either buy, rent, or even rent a room in your property. So I definitely got to kind of point people there.
Very cool.
Like Des Moines, Iowa. I don't know.
Yeah,
throw it out there.
Put it out there.
Didn't even say that. When awesome Midwest cities. Nothing. Come on, Scott. I want to go in.
it's kind of like, my knowledge on those areas isn't the greatest, right?
Do you even know where Iowa is? Come on, Scott. I'm totally kidding. Okay, so I want to ask you something about your father. So would you say he was your mentor in getting this, or like who's your mentor now? Do you have one?
Man, I really wish I had a better answer to that. I've definitely been looking at this. I don't even have like an board of advisors. I don't really have anybody who I'm going to for help at this point in time. So I'd say I'm kind of actively looking for somebody in the sort of real estate market or hospitality lodging, that I can sort of lean on for strategic advice and also personal advice on how to scale a company. As we're like 35 people now and probably be, 70 in 12 months, really kind of all this organizational growth and health stuff. But I'd say I don't now, but I'm actively searching. So,
man, that is the hardest thing. I mean, Brian and I are the same way. Like, we need to scale this practice, but how do you do it in a wise way where everyone feels still connected? I mean, it is a $1 million question. So,
the entrepreneur's challenge,
yes,
to scale and to build a business. And so, I am just fascinated with this market. I'm fascinated with your site. Any new tools or anything you're working on for the next 12 months with AirDNA that we should be looking for?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you asked. So I think the latest thing we launched which is pretty cool and really simplifies and dumbs all this stuff down, is what we call the rentalizer. It is, you just put in an address and it just spits back like what your comps look like, how much they earned over the last 12 months, what we project your property to earn over the next 12 months. So that's kind of our latest tool that we are kind of working on new iterations for, making sure the accuracy of that is great as possible. I think there's two other main projects we're working on. One is, how to have a customized experience for everybody. So once you've got one property, just load up your URL. We're going to tell you everything you want to know in like the easiest way possible and tell you what you're doing right, tell you what you're doing wrong, give you alerts about upcoming events, tell you just about what your comp's doing, how you're performing against them, help you curate some new stuff. So really the goal, of our tools to make it as custom as possible. So no one person is two people are having the exact same experience in the tool. And then three, I think the next big challenge is really doing pricing, revenue management, as they say, is dynamic pricing. Basically, what is your property worth every single day of the year, and how is that changing day to day based off of new information about supply and demand in the market? It's really hard. Hotels don't even do it very well. Every vacation rental is unique. And so we've been looking at solving this problem for a couple of years now. And so we'll get there in the next 12 months, but it is not an easy task.
Yeah. It's like there's a lot of data out there, but it's got to be crazy to try to get it all, if that makes sense. Like, just all the county assessors pages and all the transactions that are happening and, all the people that are paying through Airbnb and all the transactions Zillow's trying to pick up. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, especially with, AI and automation and just the expansion of all this, the access to information and synthesizing that is going to be extremely valuable.
And that's what we're trying to lead. I mean, at the core of what we're doing, we are really a data aggregator. So we are trying to figure out how to get as many data sources piped into us as possible, whether that's scraping data or partnerships with other software providers, or whether individuals are giving us data themselves. We're going to get it all from all those sources. And so that's the biggest thing. You can't really build out any good AI unless you have a really solid flow of data that's updated every single day and accurate. And so that's the first problem. That's the first step. So, we're still in the first inning as we say around here, and that is just getting good data. And then the power of that stuff will be unveiled over the coming years.
Where is your company headquarters, Scott? So
we're headquartered here in Denver, Colorado. And we also have an office in Barcelona, Spain.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. It's not a bad place to go visit a couple of years. Get away from the family and kids and tell them it's a business trip. Right?
So one of our other residual streams, we focus on the 7 sources, real estate, obviously what we're talking about today and with you, but your business is set up as a subscription model, and it's set up, it seems like by zip code or by kind of territory that you want access to.
Sure.
Can you kind of walk our listeners through just the basics of your site, how it's priced and how Rentalizer kind of seems like that first step of like, what's my spare bedroom worth or what's that suite worth, in terms of getting started with Airbnb. Can you kind of walk our listeners through that in your platform?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So our flagship product is called Market Minder. Rentalizer is sort of rolled into as a feature of Market Minder. Market Minder is the market intelligence tool. What is the occupancy rate monthly for every property type and size, and what's the average daily rate, like seasonality, like basically any geeky stat you want to know about your specific city or a neighborhood zip code within your city is available there. And that price is anywhere from $20 a month to $100 a month, depending on the size of the marketplace. And so what there is a need for in this real estate investor community is more of this sort of top-down approach, which means like, hey, I'm looking at all of Iowa. Just tell me where the best place to invest in Iowa is, right? And so we have another product. We're rolling into Market Minder eventually, but it's called Investment Explorer. So you can subscribe to any state. It's a couple $100 a month, but it really does this sort of, I want to invest in California. Where's the most profitable zip code, right? And so we're solving that problem with Investment Explorer, and Market Minder is more of that. I am about to buy a property. Let me do all my due diligence on like all the competition, what I'm expecting, what does my pro forma look like? And that's sort of like for the deeper analysis of the market, and also the operational stuff, right? How are the comps doing? How am I performing versus them? How should I be pricing for the upcoming event? So that's all in Market Minder. So there's, it's a lot there, but I hope that clears it up a little bit.
Definitely. That's very helpful. What in terms of, like property types, I know, like you hear all the time, like, oh, these people have a tree house and it's rented out, it's booked out 4 years in advance, Are you seeing that as you travel around? I mean, you're exposed to a lot. Like what, if somebody's going to get into this, is it more unique? Is it keep it simple? Like kind of any ideas there?
I think it depends on the market. I am a big believer that, you have to have something that stands out a little bit. It has to have, maybe a sort of a theme, or you have to have a certain sort of customer in mind. If there are 5,000 other 1 and 2 bedrooms around you, you got to figure out a way to stand out, right? And that can be as simple as like really marketing to people traveling with kids, or marketing to people that are musicians and you have a piano and a guitar in the place, right? Like there are like little things like that you can do to sort of focus on a core customer that you want to stand out with. But in some smaller markets, it's really just about like getting it up, getting 5 stars, having it look clean, and just like having it look, well designed. I mean, people really do. I'm always surprised if people buy, a $500,000 piece of real estate and then they throw $7,000 of furniture in the place. And you're just like, man, like, the design, the features, all that stuff really does pay dividends, right? So don't skimp on some artwork or some other things, because that's where I see a lot of people sort of falling short.
So can I dig a little deeper on that?
Sure. So
you're saying like you, instead of getting a $500,000 property, get the $400,000 property and put $100,000 into it, more so, or
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a general way to think about it. Yeah. I think, that's exactly right. 95% of the pictures are of the inside of the house, not the outside of the house. None of them are of the neighborhood, right? So focus more on like what are people actually looking at, which is like the bedspread and what kind of stuff you've got in the house, right? And just like find little design features. So I always find people like just like skimp on that, and it always ends up biting them at the end of the day.
I want to go to like, let's talk about your challenges and your obstacles from getting to where you're at now. What has been like the moment where you're like kind of itching your head, like, oh no, like, did I really do this? Like, has there ever been that moment? Maybe there hasn't. I hope there hasn't, but it seems like there always has in entrepreneurs. What is that moment for you, and how did you push through?
Oh, we all have those moments. I think I've been pretty fortunate not to have any of those like game ending experiences quite yet. I had my original CTO leave me about 9 months ago. We just didn't have the same sort of vision on where this company was going. We didn't have real alignment, and we were just having problem. He wasn't going to move to Denver, and he was still in LA working in his basement, right? And so, I think there's some of those things that you go through where you're like, man, this could be a real problem. He knows everything about the architecture, the scraping, the website, like all the security risk, all the passwords, and you're like, all right, well, this is this. Here we go. But, we've come out the other side. We've hired 10 people to sort of fill his role and do much more. And we, just finally, processed a buyout of all of his equity. And, I think we're bigger and better and stronger now that you had to kind of go through that and figure out, right, how do we reduce this risk in the future? How do we really hire a real diversified team that's committed to hiring? And so I think that's really the only one I've had so far. I am fortunate, and I'm crossing my fingers as we speak.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because you said exactly what I was kind of shooting for, is you're better on the other side. And I can't tell you, we've done this a lot, but we've heard some obstacles and they all would say, no, I'm better because of it. Like it sucked while we were going through it, but now that we're on the other side, man, it's something that we've learned from and we're better because of it. So that's cool. So let's quick talk about your personal life. So are you married, kids?
Yep. Married for 4 years with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So yeah, man, I started all this business out of necessity, to be honest with you. Like I went to do that traveling. I met my wife in the middle of that trip and she was pregnant, 9 months later and married a few months after that. And so, there's nothing more motivating than a pregnant wife and a job.
Yeah.
So,
how do you balance all this with your family life and how do you do that?
It's good. I mean, I got to say the first 2 years are always going to be a bit hard. There was I worked out of my garage for almost 2 years, doing the 16-hour sort of days. And so it's not easy. I tell you that much, but you do get to that point where you can start to hand off things. And my life's much more kind of standard, sort of like 8 to 6 sort of work day, which is totally acceptable to me. How do you balance it all? Dude, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I lost all my hobbies. I lost most of my friends and I worked and hung up my family. That's how I balanced it. So I got rid of anything that wasn't extra.
Prioritize.
Yeah,
nice.
Exactly.
Good. Thanks.
Well, Scott, I am so grateful for the time today and you just getting on here with our listeners. And like I said, I think you are ahead of your time. And I think if people are very serious about Airbnb, which to us is maybe the easiest way to get started in dabbling in real estate, I think your tool and the company and the mission that you're on is a great asset and tool for people to leverage in order to make that more predictable path. And so, is there anything else you'd like to share today or highlight about AirDNA or your story?
No, I mean, just stay, we're working on tons of things all the time. We're putting out a lot of great content soon, a lot about investing as well. So, just stay in touch at, airdna.co, check out our blog, subscribe to our newsletter. And I think we'll be surprising you with even more cooler stuff in the next year.
I love it. We're huge fans, Scott. Keep doing what you're doing and know that we're right here if you need anything from us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
That's all for this episode of the Uncommon Life Project, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.